I'm Sergeant Ray Kelly with the Alameda County Sheriff's Office. I'm the Public Information Officer for our agency. Obviously, you are all here in regards to the eviction on Magnolia regarding the Moms for Housing incident. I'll have to take you back a little bit in the calendar, back to November, when the mothers occupied the residence on Magnolia. During that time, they unlawfully entered that dwelling and established residency in that location. During that time, a civil process was started to do an eviction. There were multiple hearings in regards to that, tremendous amount of due process that occurred between both the plaintiffs and defendants. As a result of that, last Friday, an order was issued by the Alameda County Superior Court mandating that we evict the occupants of the Magnolia residence. So we had 5 days to complete that. Typically, we're allowed about 180 days to do an eviction, but the way that this eviction was ordered, it left us with a 5-day window. Over the last week, there's been a tremendous buildup in regards to attention for this case. We've seen a tremendous amount of attention, protest, and momentum out on Magnolia, and the Moms for Housing group has garnered a lot of attention in regards to their movement. That put our office in a very tricky position in regards to trying to deal with this situation. So we said from the get-go that we did not want to have any type of confrontation, that we wanted to keep this as simple and as low-key as possible. I'll explain later why I believe we accomplished that today. But there was a tremendous amount of work that went into this, and we had to think outside the box a little bit, because this was not your typical eviction that we routinely do. So we had a lot of information from inside the home that there was concerns for officer safety and concerns for safety of anybody that was going to intercede in this incident. So we had to work to find the right time and the right day to do this, knowing that we were up against that 5-day window. And as the days began to tick by, it seemed like the energy level really got ramped up. So we effected the eviction this morning about 5:15 a.m. That was by design. When we arrived on scene, there were about 5 or so people out front. They were kind of keeping vigil throughout the night, looking out. We had lookouts. We had different groups involved in this movement. Some are associated with some of the violent protests that we have seen throughout the Bay Area, and we had reason to believe that had we gone in there at any time other than the early morning hours, it was likely we would end up in a serious confrontation with those folks. So once we executed the eviction about 5 this morning, the doors were barricaded. They had fortified the doors, and making entry into the residence was very difficult. They had come up with a system and a way to secure those doors to make them difficult for us to enter the home. So we could not enter the home traditionally with a key or using a locksmith. They were fortified in such a way that we had to use a ram and a tremendous amount of force to get through and defeat the mechanisms that they had put in place. That was by design, not only the front door, but the back door as well. And so once we were able to open the door, we then made multiple announcements into the residence. We had an idea that there would be several occupants in there. Those people acknowledged that they were inside, and they let us know that they would not come out or cooperate, but they were not going to be actively resisted, and that they wanted to be arrested peacefully. And so we complied with that. They were detained in handcuffs without incident. No force was used, and then they were brought out to awaiting patrol vehicles and are now being booked into Santa Rita jail. About that time that we had the eviction kind of complete, a call went out to a lot of the activists and the protesters who've been involved in this, and during the course of the next hour or so that we were on scene, a tremendous swell of people from around the area came in and began to protest. We did encounter quite a bit of hostility from those folks. Most of it was verbal. We did get some things thrown at us, and there were some threats from people in the crowd, but our personnel showed tremendous restraint in regards to dealing with this. And there was no significant incident of force. There was no injuries that were reported, and we basically were able to do this operation in the presence of the entire world and all the media watching us, and come away with very little impact in regards to doing this operation. I'm going to open it up for questions now. I have already shared a list of, there's 3 individuals that were arrested, 2 females, which we believe are part of the Moms for Housing group, and a male that was also in the home with them. I can get you those names a bit later if you don't have them already. I will open it up for questions. I'll start over here.
So you say you had reason to believe that the safety of officers would have been put into question. What was your reason?
Well, there was multiple safety concerns. Number one was the children that we knew were in the home, but during the course of the last week, they had made a good decision to remove the children from the home, knowing that it was leading up to the final 5 days. So we really appreciate Moms for Housing for removing the children from that situation and kind of bringing down the level of concern, at least for us as law enforcement. Our second concern was the residents in the home. We wanted to make sure that there was no issues in there. And then obviously we want to be safe in doing our jobs, and we don't want to go into an environment where we had information and some inside information that there could have been threats to our safety. So there was a lot of things that we had to take into account.
A lot of people were wondering why a SWAT team was called out for moms and children. That was the biggest thing I heard after you guys left.
Yeah, that was not a SWAT team. So we did have members of our tactical team on site, but that was mostly made up of deputies and officers from our agency who were working in multiple different capacities. We did have a tactical element out there, and it was rather small. You've probably seen them on some of the news footage that's out there, but we made tremendous steps to make sure that we did not look like a militarized force going in there. We obviously know what the optics are. We did not want to go in there with a heavy footprint, and we tried to stick to our basic uniforms and our basic lowest level approach to the situation. But knowing some of the threats that were out there and some of the things that had been said, we had to have people on standby in the event of a severe emergency, including a ballistic vehicle in case we had to do rescues of either citizens or people in the home or officers on the scene.
And what were the charges specifically for the?
All of the charges are resisting and obstructing the eviction process. They're misdemeanors.
And it was the 2 moms and the man. They were all 3 that were in the home that said, "Hey, when you guys come in, we're going to peacefully give up."
Yeah, they peacefully did not resist, and they peacefully gave up. But they stated that they wanted to be arrested, and we did give them ample opportunity not to be arrested. We made multiple announcements for a period of about 5 minutes before they were arrested, so they had ample time to comply with those.
Which organization specifically were you concerned about? Was this the anti-police one?
I don't want to get into naming all the different organizations, but there are organizations out there and factions that come into situations like this, and they bring somewhat of a criminal element. I'm not sure that Moms for Housing necessarily condones that or was part of that, but there were people that came in. There were people we know that flew into the Bay Area specifically to be a part of this problem and not a part of the solution. And we had to deal with that and factor that into our decision making.
Do you know if they showed up in the later or 5, 6 o'clock hour after you'd already removed the people?
Some people showed up, yeah. But
do you know if it was them, though?
There were some of those folks we believe did show up this morning, or later in the morning after the eviction had already been completed, to protest as well. But by and large, we were able to get out of there with any significant issues.
Has the owner of the house taken any steps to make sure that this isn't repeated?
Yeah, I think that's a good question that everybody's concerned about. Well, what's stopping them from going in and reoccupying the home, right? So the house has been fortified. Inside, the doors have been fortified. If someone was to reoccupy the place at this point, they would be arrested for a trespass charge. It would be up to the city of Oakland and the Oakland Police Department to enforce that. once that complaint is brought forth by the owner. So the sheriff's office strictly was involved in the civil process of the eviction. It would not be our duty to go back and make an arrest for a trespass. That would fall in the Oakland Police Department.
What about all the belongings in the house? Will the former residents have a chance to get them?
Yes, the owner is charged with the safekeeping of that property, and the owner has a certain amount of days to return that property. We were not going to do that today. I think it would have kind of inflamed the tensions out there to see property being moved into storage vehicles and whatnot. So we made a decision that can be done at a later date. That is legal to do that, and at some point they can do that. There was not a tremendous amount of property in that home. I actually went through it and walked through the house. I did not see a lot of property in that house. There was some very basic furnishings. As the house was, it's pretty old. It's definitely in need of repair. I saw areas of mold that were concerning if you were going to stay in some of those rooms. So the house did need a lot of work, and it was not heavily furnished.
Is there any reason to believe that these groups, or any concern these groups will target other homes in Oakland and do the same thing?
That's definitely something we're looking at. Obviously, that this is part of a movement, and that there will be other similar incidents. We won't know about that until they occur. This is a lot of these issues are civil issues. If you don't act within a certain amount of time, if law enforcement doesn't act immediately upon a trespass, and time goes by and they establish kind of residency within that location, you kind of run from the criminal penal code sections into more of the civil code sections. So because they establish occupancy, and then if there was some type of indifference where you allow that to happen, that's how we get into these situations. So law enforcement would have to act pretty quickly once they know there's a trespass and squatting going on. Otherwise, you establish a situation where there is residency and a right to some type of possession, and therefore we end up with these elongated incidents.
And do you only do that at the invitation or the asking of the building owner?
Yes, you can only do that with the complaint of the owner of the property.
Was the back of the building or house boarded up, areas that we couldn't see? I don't know what this.
You mean fortified?
Fortified.
Yes, they were. The back door was fortified.
No, I mean, did you fortify it?
Yes, we did. We did fortify it.
Plywood?
Yes, plywood. And like I said, you could probably kick the plywood off and go in there if you really wanted to. Hopefully nobody does that. But we did talk to several residents in the area. Many of you had interviewed some of the neighbors, but some of the neighbors were actually very happy that we had come in and done the eviction. They were getting very tired of the tremendous amount of traffic that was going on in the neighborhood and some of the issues that came along with hosting this protest every day.
Do you know, I know you're not OPD, but do you know if they're going to have a squad car out there to make sure
I don't think, I don't know, but I don't think that the Oakland Police Department is going to spend a tremendous amount of time sitting in front of that house. I think if someone chooses to go back in there, the owner can call, they can request Oakland make an arrest if anybody goes in and reoccupies.
Just to clarify, you said the reason for having all of those deputies and the response that you designed, as you said, was because of this movement. Otherwise, an eviction would have been, what, maybe 2, 3?
A typical eviction is just 2 to 3 deputies, and we do an assessment of each eviction, and if depending on what the threats are, we adjust from there. This is not your typical eviction. I think we can all recognize that. This is something that swelled into an enormous movement with a tremendous amount of people that created a series of concerns for safety on a number of levels. So we had to go in there with the right tools. I think we handled this very professionally. I feel that we did a great job, and the fact that we got out of there without any significant issues is a testament to the professionalism of our people.
Do you know when they're going to be arraigned?
These are misdemeanor arrests, so they'll either be cited or given a court date, and
So
we'll let you know.
booked in Santa Rita and they're released?
Santa Rita, yeah, I'm not sure if these are citable offenses, but they can either bail. The bail is pretty low on a obstruction arrest.
But they'll get processed over in Santa Rita?
Yes, they will get booked into Santa Rita. They're probably there about now.
I heard there was some kind of robot deployed in the house as well. Is that true?
Yes, we did. We did put a robot in. One of our things that we do in a situation like that is we want to kind of start remote, stay remote, and not create a situation where we're going to get into some type of escalation of force. So we try to use technology. We used the robot just to go in, look around, and it was able to give us information and kind of give us a little bit of a layout. And so the people in there saw that, and it helped us. It's just a tool that we use, and so it helps de-escalate situations. It helps give us a little bit more information as to when we go into a structure.
There weren't any weapons or anything illegal inside the house?
We did not see any weapons or any type of contraband in the house that was.
So the stuff that you were initially worried about wasn't there?
What do you?
No, like, you know how you said you had gotten information of like there could be.
Well, we
threats
didn't
or
expect
dangers?
there to be a cache of weapons in there or anything like that, or anything. So that was never a concern. But there were people on the periphery outside of the home that we saw coming and going with backpacks, with clothing and other methods and to hide their identity. There are people that we've often encountered in some of the protests that we've seen throughout the Bay Area, and they are often associated with disorder and disorderly conduct.
Can you estimate how much your enforcement action and the fortification of the house is going to cost taxpayers?
I can tell you that it definitely will cost money. We actually have discussed going back at the corporation that owns the home and charging them for all of the fees that have been associated with this.
Yeah.
And so that is something we're looking at. It's sending the corporation a bill for all of our services that we provided, and that will be probably in the thousands and thousands of dollars, and hopefully we can recoup some of that cost.
Tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands of dollars have gone into this situation.
I know it's like technically it wasn't a tank, maybe you have another label for it, but the impression for people who don't know the difference between what things look like, to the public it looked like the SWAT team, a tactical army team, because they had those kind of fatigues. Can you address that, I guess?
Well, first off, we're law enforcement. We're not the military, and so
Yeah.
we don't have tanks. We don't have armored, cars. We do use ballistic vehicles. They help keep us safe when we have to go into areas. They also allow us to put victims in there and transport them to hospitals, and they also allow us to store our equipment. So they're often described as these military-type vehicles, but they're not. They are. There's no offensive weapons on those vehicles. They're strictly for protection, and so they're ballistic vehicles. They're routinely used throughout the country every day to keep people safe.